Welcome to the Full Moon Film Buff, episode 172. We're going to talk about Conrad Brooks versus the Werewolf from 1994. I rented this from Scarecrow Video, and I had not seen this before. I also watched Nelson's first werewolf short, Son of the Werewolf, from 1993, since it was on the same compilation Blu-ray. As always, we start with the prominent crew and cast. You can usually find a link to a more complete credit list, but not in this case. Both films were written, directed, edited, with special effects by David "The Rock" Nelson. We first discussed David Nelson when we covered Miss Werewolf. The cast includes Conrad Brooks as himself, Henry Baderski as himself, Ted Brooks as himself, David Nelson as the werewolf, the mad caretaker, and the werewolf's son, with Janet Lynn as Janet. Conrad Brooks was born Conrad Baderski, the son of Polish immigrant bakers. At 17, he traveled to Hollywood with his brothers, where a chance meeting in a donut shop with legendary filmmaker Ed Wood would define the rest of his life. Brooks appeared in 6 Ed Wood films, including Glen or Glenda, Bride of the Monster, and the infamous Plan 9 from Outer Space. He was a friend and supporter, helping Wood with rent money during the director's most creative period. During these productions, Brooks worked alongside horror legend Bela Lugosi. Brooks went on to appear in nearly 100 genre films over 6 decades, working continuously from his teenage years into his 80s. He founded Conrad Brooks Productions, creating his own films, including the Gypsy Vampire series and the Jangel trilogy. Brooks became a beloved figure on the horror convention circuit, where he was the last surviving member of Ed Wood's acting troupe and a big-hearted presence who never treated his association with bad movies as anything to be embarrassed about. He remained available to independent filmmakers throughout his life, even appearing in a 2015 remake of Plan 9. Conrad Brooks passed away in 2017 at age 86, leaving behind a legacy that proved passion and friendship matter more than polish in cinema. Henry Baderski was the oldest of the 3 brothers. He notably appeared in John Waters' Female Trouble and Glen and Glenda. Henry primarily stayed in the Baltimore area rather than pursuing Hollywood stardom. Ted Brooks was the middle brother between Henry and Conrad. He has a much shorter filmography than his brothers. I also discussed Janet Lynn back when I covered Miss Werewolf. Son of the Werewolf is honestly the best work I've seen from Nelson. Conrad Brooks versus the Werewolf feels like a vanity project. Both of them feel like coherent stories with beginnings, middles, and ends. But that doesn't mean I'm recommending them. This is absolutely not for everyone. If you approach this expecting traditional horror filmmaking, you will be sorely disappointed. But if you're interested in outsider cinema, folk art horror, or just want to witness something that is genuinely unique, then this 43-minute oddity is recommended viewing. This film was made in 1994, the same year Tim Burton's Ed Wood biopic hit theaters and won Academy Awards. While Hollywood was celebrating Wood's legacy with star power and big budgets, David Nelson was creating his own tribute to B-movie spirit in someone's backyard with Wood's actual collaborator. Nelson described meeting Conrad Brooks at conventions and being inspired by his willingness to continue working in low-budget productions. The filming took place in Baltimore cemeteries. So let's cover both films' synopsis. Son of the Werewolf's plot is beautifully simple. A werewolf stalks and sexually assaults a young lady in her apartment. Her partner comes home and saves her by beating the werewolf to death with an aluminum baseball bat. 9 months later, she bears a child. 30 years later, another werewolf, I'm assuming it's her son, stalks and abducts Janet. The werewolf mourns over his father's grave. Another guy, who claims to be the son of the guy who killed the first werewolf, shows up with a gun loaded with silver bullets. That gun is knocked out of his hands, so he has to pummel the werewolf with found objects before shooting the werewolf with the dozens of silver bullets apparently loaded in the pistol. In slow motion, the werewolf dies on top of his father's grave. The end. Conrad Brooks versus the Werewolf begins with the werewolf stalking Henry Brooks through the very populated and brightly sunlit streets of Baltimore. The werewolf kills Henry, whose body is discovered by his brothers. Now, of course, Conrad and Ted Brooks recognize the work of a werewolf, so they immediately head to the local cemetery armed with a plastic Uzi and a baseball bat. Conrad references the plot of Plan 9 from Outer Space. Ted meets the local graveyard caretaker, who very slowly transforms into a werewolf, but Ted still doesn't even swing the bat once before the werewolf kills him. We are then treated to a 20-minute chase under the bright noonday sun through the cemetery. The action unfolds at the pace of a stroll. Characters walk through graveyards, the werewolf climbs all over a statue, Conrad name drops famous friends from his Ed Wood days, and Conrad literally changes his shirt for no good reason. The Uzi's normal bullets have no effect on the werewolf, and neither does the dirty shirt. For some reason, Ted's baseball bat slows the werewolf long enough for Conrad to get into his car, and Conrad runs the werewolf over several several times. Seriously, it's something like 20 times or more. I'm not exaggerating, it's a lot. So when it comes to Conrad Brooks versus the Werewolf, Conrad wins. Don't expect Rick Baker or Jack Pierce level makeup effects here. Don't expect any special effects. Nelson's werewolf transformation consists of a dime store rubber mask that he pulls on between cuts. The complete lack of pretense is charming. This isn't trying to fool anyone. It's trying to capture the spirit of childhood monster play. The film demands you use your imagination just as much as Nelson is using his. These films completely abandon most traditional werewolf mythology. The transformations happen in broad daylight, and the full moon is irrelevant. No time is wasted explaining where the werewolves come from. Now, silver is mentioned, but it's not required, and one werewolf is beaten to death with an aluminum baseball bat. The other is repeatedly run over by a car. I cannot emphasize how many times. It's werewolf cinema stripped down to its most basic elements. Monster chases people, people fight back. It's pure monster kid energy brought to life without concern for established rules or expectations. Now I want to talk about passing the torch. When David Nelson assumed the mantle of the modern Ed Wood, he wasn't joking or boasting. He was claiming a lineage, a philosophy, and a defiant approach to cinema that says passion matters more than polish. Conrad Brooks versus the Werewolf is a direct continuation of Ed Wood's guerrilla filmmaking, proving that the spirit survives even when the original practitioner is gone. Edward D. Wood Jr. has become synonymous with bad movies, but that reputation misses something essential. Active primarily in the 50s, Wood created films like Glen or Glenda and Plan 9 from Outer Space with virtually no budget, very questionable technical skills, and an unshakable belief in his vision. His movies featured wobbly sets, visible strings holding up flying saucers, and actors reading cue cards. When Bela Lugosi died during the production of Plan 9, Wood simply hired his chiropractor to double for him, a man who looked nothing like Lugosi and had to hold a cape over his face in front of every shot. But here's what matters. Wood never stopped making films. He gathered whoever was available, shot wherever he could, and completed his projects through sheer determination. His sets were chaotic, his dialogue bizarre, his special effects laughable. But his films got made. Ed Wood just kept shooting. For decades, Wood was dismissed as the worst director of all time, a punchline, a cautionary tale, but something has shifted in the cultural conversation. Critics and audiences recognize that beneath the undeniable technical incompetence was genuine passion, sincerity, and a purity of vision. Wood made exactly the films he wanted to make, exactly the way he wanted to make them. He answered to no one, compromised nothing, and created a body of work undeniably his own. Tim Burton's 1994 biopic helped cement this reevaluation, portraying Wood as both a hack and a dreamer, someone who loved cinema so much that nothing could stop him from participating in it. So when David Nelson embraced the title of the modern Ed Wood, he was claiming this spirit of unstoppable creativity. Nelson's work shares Wood's guerrilla ethos. Work with what you have, use who's available, never let budget constraints stop your vision. His films are shot in backyards and basements and cemeteries with practical effects made from household materials. Like Wood, Nelson gathers a troupe of loyal collaborators. Like Wood, he finishes his films. The most direct connection comes through Conrad Brooks versus the Werewolf. Brooks isn't just any actor. He was Ed Wood's actual collaborator. Brooks spent decades carrying the torch for Wood's legacy, appearing at conventions and in low-budget films as a living link to that bygone era. When he appeared in Nelson's productions, a direct lineage was established from Plan 9 from Outer Space to backyard horror that filmed decades later. Brooks' participation isn't just a novelty. It suggests that Wood's approach wasn't an isolated quirk of one eccentric director, but a philosophy that can be passed down. Brooks, who worked directly with Wood and understood his methods intimately, saw something authentic in Nelson's work. He recognized the same determination, the same refusal to be stopped by a lack of resources, the same love of the process. What unites Wood and Nelson isn't just their low budgets, it's their response to those budgets. Mainstream cinema treats budget constraints as problems to be solved, obstacles to overcome until proper funding arrives. Wood and Nelson treat limitations as creative parameters, as the very conditions under which their particular brand of magic happens. A big budget wouldn't make their films better. It would make them different, but it might even make them less interesting. This philosophy inverts traditional Hollywood logic. Instead of waiting for ideal conditions, Wood and Nelson start shooting. Instead of hiring professionals, they work with friends and enthusiasts. Instead of building elaborate sets, they use available locations. And instead of expensive special effects, they create practical effects with whatever is at hand. The results are rough, certainly, but they're also immediate, personal, and utterly authentic. There's something almost punk rock about this approach, a do-it-yourself ethos that says you don't need permission from gatekeepers to be a filmmaker. You don't need film school credentials, studio backing, or expensive equipment. You need a camera, some collaborators, and the willingness to just start. In an era where barriers to entry have theoretically lowered thanks to digital technology, Wood and Nelson remind us that the real barrier was never technical, but it was always psychological. The question was never, can I afford to make a movie, but will I let the lack of money stop me? Both Wood and Nelson have faced mockery for their work. Both persisted with genuine sincerity. Wood truly believed he was making important films and approached even his most outlandish projects with an earnest commitment. Nelson similarly treats his projects seriously, even when he's working with a deliberately absurd premise like a werewolf fighting Conrad Brooks. And this sincerity is crucial. These aren't parodies or knowing winks at bad movie conventions. They're sincere attempts to create cinema. There's courage in that sincerity. It's easy to make something ironically bad, to fail on purpose to get laughs. It's much harder to try your best and accept that the results are going to be ridiculed anyway. Wood and Nelson both take that risk, and their films are more interesting because of it. The passion shows through their obvious technical limitations. You can feel that someone cared about these projects, believed in them, fought to bring them into existence. Wood's regular troupe, Conrad Brooks, Tor Johnson, Vampira, formed a repertory company that held together by loyalty and friendship rather than professional advancement. Similarly, Nelson works with recurring collaborators across multiple projects. These aren't actors who are chasing fame or fortune. They're participants in a shared creative endeavor, a community built around the joy of making movies together. This collaborative spirit stands in stark contrast to the hierarchical, often exploitative structure of commercial filmmaking. Wood and Nelson sets are democratic spaces where everyone contributes what they can. The boom operator might also play a zombie. The person who brings coffee might end up with a speaking role. This fluidity comes from necessity, but it also creates a different kind of energy, one based on mutual support and shared ownership. Wood died in 1978, the same year Hollywood convinced us a man could fly in Richard Donner's Superman. He was broke and largely forgotten, convinced he had failed. He never lived to see his rehabilitation, never knew that his films would be celebrated, studied, and even imitated. The fact that David Nelson can claim Wood's legacy today, that Conrad Brooks could bridge those two eras, proves Wood's influence extends far beyond his own filmography. Woods didn't just make movies. He demonstrated a way of making movies, a philosophy that says creation matters more than perfection. And Nelson's embrace of Wood's approach keeps that philosophy alive for a new generation. In an age of crowdfunding, digital cameras, and YouTube distribution, the barriers have never been lower. Yet many aspiring filmmakers still wait for ideal conditions that will never arrive. Nelson, like Wood before him, offers a different model. Start now, work with what you have, and finish your film. The results might be rough, they might be ridiculed, but they'll exist. You'll have made something real, something that wouldn't exist if you'd waited for perfect conditions. So, if you like lycanthropes, like, share, and subscribe. Contribute your thoughts and additional observations in the comments below. Let me know what I missed or what you noticed. Next, I plan to discuss Savaged from 2008. Keep your eye on the moon, a silver bolt in the chamber, and we'll see you back next episode.